Once upon a time, in the early 1900s, there was a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto, but his family called him Gene. Gene was a lonely boy whose only wish was to have a friend. One day, an associate of his parents gave Gene a one-of-a-kind handmade doll. Gene immediately took a liking to the doll, and he became very attached to the doll. Gene named the doll Robert, after himself, and he and the doll were soon inseparable. Gene's friendship with Robert grew, and their attachment became stronger over time. But what Gene did not know was that there was an evil attached to the doll, and things began to turn for the worse in the Otto home upon the arrival of Robert the doll. One night, when Gene was 10, he was awakened by Robert, who was sitting on the edge of Gene's bed, staring at him menacingly. While everyone was asleep, Gene screamed, and his mother, Anne, was woken up by the commotion. She ran into Gene's room while he screamed at the top of his lungs. When she opened the door to Gene's room, all the furniture in the room was overturned. Toys and blankets were thrown everywhere, and Gene was curled up in a ball on his bed. Terrified, Gene said, "Robert did it!" Gene's mother looked over at Robert, who was still sitting at the foot of the bed. She began to feel uneasy with the doll. She soon began to suspect that something was not quite right with the doll. And after a few uneasy nights, Gene's mother threw Robert into the attic for her son's safety. Even though Robert the doll had scared Gene, Gene could not bear to be separated from his only friend. Robert had cast a spell over Gene, and late at night, Gene would sneak into the attic and retrieve the doll, whispering secrets and playing games with Robert until dawn. Each morning, Gene would return the doll to the attic before his mother could discover their secret meanings. As the years passed, strange occurrences continued to plague the Otto household. The hired help would quit without explanation, sighs and eerie laughter echoing through the halls at night. Gene's parents often awoke to find their possessions rearranged, and an oppressive atmosphere seemed to hang over the entire property. Children around the neighborhood would see Robert staring out of the attic window, looking at them with envious eyes. Even when people came over for a visit, many claimed of hearing footsteps from the upstairs attic. Some made claims of hearing devilish laughter coming from the attic. Despite the growing unease, Gene's obsession with Robert only intensified. As he entered his teenage years, Gene began to withdraw from his family and peers, spending more and more time alone with the doll. His parents watched helplessly as their once vibrant son became a recluse, his eyes taking on a vacant, glassy quality reminiscent of Robert's own lifeless stare. As the years passed, Gene grew into a solitary young man, and Robert the doll had been put away for a long time. But the memory of that one terrifying night never left him. Though Robert was locked away in the attic, strange occurrences continued to plague the Otto household. Gene found himself drawn to the attic and Robert the doll. Despite his mother's warnings, Gene would sit for hours, staring at the trunk that held Robert, feeling a mixture of fear and longing. One stormy evening, as lightning illuminated the attic's dusty corners, Gene finally mustered the courage to open the trunk. There sat Robert, exactly as he remembered, with his piercing glass eyes. As Gene reached out to touch the doll, a chill ran down his spine. Robert's head slowly turned, and those once lifeless eyes now glowed with an unholy light. A sinister smile seemed to creep across the doll's painted face. Hello, friend. A raspy voice whispered, seemingly emanating from Robert's motionless lips. I've been waiting for you. Gene stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to run, to scream, but he found himself rooted to the spot. Robert's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as he rose from the trunk, floating inches above the attic floor. We have so much catching up to do, Robert continued, his voice growing stronger. You've grown, Gene, but you're still mine. You'll always will be mine. Paralyzed with fear, Gene watched as Robert drifted closer, the doll's tiny hand reaching out, icy fingers brushing against Gene's cheek. Before Robert could come any closer, Gene ran out of the attic. And shut the door, locking it, and vowed never to go back for the rest of his life. Gene's hands trembled as he fumbled with the lock, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He stumbled down the attic stairs, nearly falling in his haste to put as much distance as possible between himself and Robert. The house seemed to groan and shift around him as if awakening from a long slumber. As he reached the second-floor landing, Gene heard a soft thump from above, followed by the creak of floorboards. His blood ran cold as he realized that the attic door was slowly opening, despite the lock he had just engaged. Without looking back, he bolted down the main staircase and out the front door, not stopping until he reached the street. The cool night air helped clear his head, but the events that had just transpired left Gene in a state of panic. Questions swirled in his mind. Gene now understood that his connection to the doll was far more than a child, than his toy. Robert the doll had invaded Gene's thoughts and mind. Gene's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the sidewalk, his mind reeling. As he looked back at the house, he could see a small figure silhouetted in the attic window. Robert's unmistakable form stood there watching him. Even from this distance, Gene could feel the doll's malevolent gaze boring into him. Suddenly, the streetlights began to flicker and dim. A cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying whispers that seemed to call Gene's name. He scrambled to his feet, knowing he couldn't stay there. But where could he go? Robert's spirit had latched onto Gene's. As if in answer to his unspoken question, a cab turned the corner and slowed to a stop beside him. The driver's face was obscured by shadow, but Gene hesitated for only a moment before climbing into the back seat. As the cab pulled away from the curb, he risked one last glance at his childhood home. Robert was no longer visible in the window, but Gene knew the doll wasn't far behind. "Where to?" the driver asked, his voice oddly familiar. Gene opened his mouth to respond, but realized he had no destination in mind. He just needed to get away, to break the cycle that had bound him to Robert. "As far as you can take me," Gene finally replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The driver nodded silently and accelerated, the houses of Gene's neighborhood blurring into the darkness. As they drove, Gene felt a strange calm descend upon him. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. But his relief was short-lived. As they passed the city limits, Robert's voice was again in Gene's mind. "Did you really think you could escape me so easily?" Robert's voice echoed. "We're bound together, you and I, forever." Gene's heart raced as he turned to face the doll. But the back seat was empty. When he looked back at the driver, he realized with horror that the man behind the wheel was no longer human. Instead, a larger version of Robert sat there, his glassy eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Where shall we go next, old friend?" the doll driver asked, its head rotating unnaturally to face Gene. Gene screamed in horror. The morning light filled Gene's eyes as he woke up to find Robert, the doll, sitting by his bed. Jean vowed on that day to never let another innocent soul take possession of the cursed doll. They remained together till 1974. Jean Otto passed away, and new owners purchased the Ottos' home, but Robert the doll was left in the attic. One day, the new owner's young daughter was exploring the home and found the door to the attic. There she found an old trunk and opened it up. Robert the doll was sitting there as if he had been waiting for her to find him. As she picked up Robert and began to dust him off, Robert turned to her and said, "I'm not gonna hurt you." The young child screamed at the top of her lungs, and her parents came running in. They saw their daughter crying in terror and told them that the doll would talk to me. So scared of her wits that her parents took the doll to the East Martello fort for their daughter's safety. The doll was sealed away, so no one would be traumatized by Robert the doll. Again. So, if you ever go to Florida and visit Fort Martello, or if you want to see Robert the doll, I will be very careful of what you say about Robert. Because if you make a mistake and say something negative about him, or if you take a picture of him without asking, then you will be cursed by Robert's wrath, and you will have extreme bad luck and misfortune. The only way to stop his curse is to write an apology note and put it near Robert and say, "I'm sorry, Robert. If you follow these rules, you will be safe. If not, then you too may become the next victim of the demonic entity known as Robert the doll."